Namaskar and welcome to World Today. Well, 23 countries have backed a pandemic treaty idea. This is to avert future emergencies. Also, the WHO has said that China had withheld data from its team that was probing into the origins of the COVID virus in Wuhan. And the report now does not actually detail the origin of the virus. So that's going to be the main story today, and we'll be discussing it a little bit. But first, here are the headlines. As the world battles COVID-19, leaders of 23 countries back a pandemic treaty idea for future emergencies. The treaty is aimed at ensuring universal and equitable access to vaccines, medicines, and diagnostics for pandemics. A joint WHO-China study on the virus's origin says it had probably been transmitted from bats to humans through another animal, and that a lab leak was extremely unlikely as a cause. WHO DG says that data was withheld from the WHO experts who went to China to research its origins. The United States and 13 other countries expressed concern. They say the report lacks crucial data information. The US President Joe Biden has extended the federal program that provides loans to small businesses to enable them to maintain workers' payrolls. He says that hundreds of thousands of people could have otherwise lost their jobs. German company G&D that supplies materials that go into making Myanmar's banknotes has suspended deliveries. They say that they are doing so with immediate effect since they don't support any military-sponsored violence in that country. And Hindustan Aeronautics Limited has also denied having supplied arms to Myanmar in commercial deals. Pakistan has reportedly lifted a nearly 2-year-old ban on Indian sugar as well as cotton imports into that country. Pakistan's Economic Coordination Council, which is a top decision-making body in that country, is reported to have allowed private sector to import 0.5 million tons of white sugar from India. So let's begin with the big news. Well, the WHO is pushing for a new international treaty for pandemic preparedness and response, and it would look for a comprehensive multi-sectoral approach to strengthen national, regional, and global capacities and resilience also for future pandemics. And 23 countries have so far they see this as an opportunity for the world to come together as a global community for peaceful cooperation and also to extend beyond this pandemic.
The world is battling COVID-19. Countries across the world are leaving no stone unturned in the fight against the virus. Leaders of 23 countries and the World Health Organization on Tuesday backed drawing up an international treaty that would help deal with future health emergencies like the coronavirus pandemic by tightening rules on sharing information.
Without an internationally coordinated, all of government, all of society, One Health approach to pandemic preparedness and response, we remain vulnerable. It has shown how much we need a universal commitment to basic public health principles as the foundation for our work to prevent, detect, and respond to epidemic and pandemic threats. The idea behind the proposal for such a treaty is to systematically tackle the gaps exposed by COVID-19. There is a problem in sharing information, so it can address that in sharing data. And then there is a problem in sharing the pathogen, and that could be addressed through the treaty. And there is a problem in sharing technology, or like vaccines. We are now confronted with vaccine equity. And this could also be addressed in the treaty.
A joint WHO-China study on the virus's origin said that it had probably been transmitted from bats to humans through another animal and that a lab leak was extremely unlikely as the cause. Dr. Ghebreyesus said data was withheld from WHO experts who went to China to research its origins.
But because of the strong suspicion of certain bat species being the host of this virus, and having found other relatively close virus strains to SARS-CoV-2 in the region, also in Southeast Asia in general, where these bats are living, is a strong indication that that's where the source is. But we're still working on finding the exact traceback of the virus before Wuhan. This is work in progress again, and we all have to be patient and again support the logic of our work, which is to start from where the first case were identified, detected in Wuhan, and looking at that event, that phase, that environment, and then expanding the environment and the studies starting from that point and radiating out of it, following the leads that individual studies will give us.
The United States and 13 other countries expressed concerns on Tuesday that the World Health Organization report on the origins of the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 was delayed and lacked access to complete data on Wuhan, China, according to a joint statement.
Well, they have not been transparent. They have not provided underlying data. That certainly doesn't qualify as cooperation. The analysis performed to date from our experts, their concern is that there isn't additional support for one hypothesis. It doesn't lead us to any closer of an understanding or greater knowledge than we had 6 to 9 months ago about the origin. It also doesn't provide us guidelines or steps, recommended steps on how we should prevent this from happening in the future, and those are imperative.
China refused to provide raw data on early COVID-19 cases to the WHO-led team. One of the team's investigators has already said, potentially complicating efforts to understand how the global pandemic began. The country's joint statement supported further studies of animals to find how the virus was introduced to humans and called for renewed commitment from the WHO and member countries to access, transparency and timeliness. World Today Desk, DD India.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, a former senior diplomat, joins us to discuss this topic. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, so the problem clearly is that there's a lack of information initially, and so perhaps this treaty is going to address that, is what the WHO Director General says. But the point is that we can see the way the US has reacted to the fact that China didn't provide enough information about this virus. And the WHO has this grand plan where grand design where the whole world gets united and prevents any future such viruses. Is there's a problem between what can be achieved and what and the constituents that are actually making up this kind of an agreement?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I think the best way to describe the WHO report is that it is an incomplete report based on inadequate data. That's the best way I can describe it, because the WHO chief, it needs to be noted, has himself said much more investigation is necessary. So it's clear to me the report is incomplete. The reason why I say data is inadequate, because a lot of scientists have said raw data is necessary. If you do not have access to all the raw data, and then it becomes extremely difficult for you to come to any kind of conclusion. The conclusions the report has come to is more in the nature of probability than any degree of certainty. It talks of likely to less likely, more likely, highly likely. Now, these get you into a realm of speculation, and a scientific report should not be speculative. That's my personal view. But what we are seeing is also an intersection between politics and science. It cannot be denied that this issue has become so political that science is constantly taking a back seat. So all in all, I would say what is interesting is the WHO chief's basic attempt to distance himself from the report. It is his own team's report, but he has accepted that he will deploy more resources. There needs to be more investigation, and there needs to be more access to data. Now,
right, that's with regard to the report, but he's called for a treaty now, and I mean, is the treaty going to be the solution to this kind of a problem in the future?
No, the treaty will be, if at all, a solution for the future. But I do not see how the treaty can help solve the fundamental question posed by everybody. How and where did this outbreak happen? We are interested in the place, we are interested in the modus operandi of the outbreak. If you don't know this, you are not in a position to prevent future outbreaks. That is the question at issue. And as long as you're going to have such a wide range of theories, I mean, they say the lab report was unlikely. The WHO chief says he doesn't think so. He says that there needs to be more resources deployed. Did it go from animal to human being? Yes, but we don't know. There is a third theory about a frozen food and how it came through a frozen food. The report doesn't rule it out. So by accepting that every theory is possible,
Yes.
the report actually muddles the issue further. That's my personal view. I've just glanced at the report. What you expect from a scientific report is a certain degree of clarity and a certain degree of probability. But this appears to entertain or contemplate all theories all at once.
Indeed,
That-
but the WHO has, I mean, as you have said as well, that they are distancing themselves from the report because they didn't have enough access. Now the point is how to give them access. They are the body that there's a in terms of global politics or in a global institution that is best equipped to handle this kind of a situation. But if they don't have the authority, then how are they going to find more information? So it's a question of giving them more teeth or creating a treaty that will in future, make information much more easily available. Is that the solution?
I think you're right in raising that question. I think you need to separate two issues here. One, what happened in Wuhan. The second, what happens in the future. In the future, you may want to give more intrusive powers to the WHO. If a pandemic happened in a place, I don't think the host government should have a choice as to whether they can invite the WHO team or not. We have to make it clear in a future treaty that there is a fundamental obligation. It's a global obligation because the pandemic is not just going to affect one country. So there is a duty on the part of the country affected by the pandemic to allow the scientists from WHO at the earliest possible opportunity and give them full access to data. That is for the future. But that still doesn't solve or address the problem of what happened in Wuhan. What do we do about Wuhan? The WHO chief says, I will deploy more resources, we will send more teams. Now, how long are you going to keep saying? I heard one member of the team say that it may take many years to find out what happened in Wuhan. So I think you need to have a certain perspective about what happened in Wuhan and the fixing of responsibility and what can happen in the future. It's very clear to everybody that in the future, you cannot allow a repetition of these things, either by the host government or by the WHO. Both have to change. And there will be a certain degree of intrusion by the WHO. The whole point of belonging to a multilateral institution is you give up a little of your sovereignty. Otherwise, why would you belong to a multilateral organization? So countries have to accept that teams should have unimpeded full access in the future in the event of the outbreak of a pandemic.
So you believe that the WHO should have more accountability as well for the current crisis, because I mean they did declare it as a pandemic and maybe a little late. It had already started spreading, and then the measures that were put in place also probably I mean there could have been a more scientific approach. We could have done things better. But what would you say? I mean, are we looking to put the blame somewhere, or are we looking to really create a much better or more robust institution in the future? Because we're talking also about a treaty, but there are only 23 or 25 countries on board currently. Are they going to create something that is it going to be counter productive in a sense, is that they're going to be functioning alternative to the WHO? Are we going to create more powers for other institutions? I mean, there are a lot of certain uncertainties here.
I think you've raised a host of very relevant issues. These are tough issues. My reaction is these will have to form the subject matter of tough negotiations between sovereign states.
Okay.
Frankly, you and I sitting here, we can say what we want, but at the
That's
end
true.
of the day, sovereign governments and countries will have to decide how much they want to part with sovereignty to confront a pandemic. Because one thing is clear, you are going to have more pandemics in the future. This is not the last pandemic. I would say three things. One, time is of the essence. And I think in the case of Wuhan, both the host government and the WHO delayed matters. And delay in the case of a pandemic is deadly. You cannot afford to have delays. So time is of the essence. Second, some teeth will have to be given to WHO. If you ask WHO why you did not do a whole lot of things, WHO will say, sorry, we don't have the teeth. We have to go by what the sovereign governments tell us. So why are you blaming us? That is their reaction. So it's clear to me, some teeth will have to be given to the WHO, but this teeth will depend on negotiations between governments, how much they want to give this teeth to the WHO. Finally, the WHO. Finally, I think we'll all have to be clear that in future, the case study of what not to do is illustrated by Wuhan. This is a case study of how things should not be done. You cannot delay the announcement of a pandemic. You cannot delay travel bans until a pandemic breaks out and spreads. Thirdly, you cannot delay the arrival of the scientific team. Look when the outbreak happened in Wuhan. Look when we are having the report. The outbreak happened in December 2019. We are now in the March of 2021. And you still have an incomplete report based on inadequate investigation.
Yes.
How is that helpful? Please tell me. So I think this is a case study of how things should not be done. I don't want to apportion blame because that doesn't help.
Yes.
I think what I am interested is whether we can learn the lessons from this in order to come up with a future paradigm or a treaty or ways of working in the WHO, which will help us all confront a pandemic jointly. That should be the real goal, frankly.
Right.
It's not to put blame on anybody. It's just that we need to find better ways collectively to confront the pandemic.
And there's an opportunity to do that right now because there is a second wave of the virus, and vaccines are available. Vaccines have to be given out to all parts of the world, and India is taking an initiative with the Vaccine Maitri program. There's the COVAX program of the WHO, and so many other. There are institutions that are involved, NGOs that are involved. So there's an opportunity here for countries to work out a sort of a blueprint. That we can have coordination and cooperation, collaboration to sort out issues like this.
Oh, you're absolutely right. If there is one thing that the pandemic has demonstrated, it is that public health is now equivalent to the national security of a country. You cannot afford to have a public health crisis and then say my country is safe. I used to say to my friends, it is ridiculous that Western countries had strategic petroleum reserves, but did not have strategic pharmaceutical reserves. What is the need to have oil? Please tell me. When you don't have enough masks, you don't have enough personal protective equipment, you don't have basic drugs like paracetamol and hydrochlorine. You will remember we sent it to many of the developed countries. And then you have strategic petroleum reserves. You have strategic foreign exchange reserves. What is the use of all that if you don't have basic drugs? So I think there is going to be a fundamental redefinition of national security. I completely agree with you. There is an opportunity to get it right. My feeling, though, is for the time being, it doesn't look great. There is vaccine inequality. Western countries have hoarded vaccines. They've ordered many more vaccines than is necessary for their population. Africa faces a crisis. Countries like India are chipping in and doing their best, but there are not too many countries which are doing it. So we are going to have vaccine inequality, which will impact travel, which will impact economic recovery, which will impact migration. You will simply need a vaccine passport to migrate from one country to another. Imagine if for 2 years economic migration stops in the world. who are the people who are going to be worst affected? It'll be
Right.
people who don't have access to vaccines. So
Sure.
we are, I think, looking at a difficult scenario. And you are right, there is an opportunity to get it right.
True, but who takes the leadership, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, at a time like this? I mean, we know that should it be, well, the UN has, of course, the UN Security Council, that is, like the controlling body in a sense. So, I mean, where does it come? You did mention that's an issue of national security also, indirectly or even directly, it's an issue of national security. So, I mean, where do you think, who is going to take the initiative? Should take the leadership position?
I'm afraid there are only a couple of organizations which can do it. One, I would hope that the G20 does it, because this year it is with Italy and then Indonesia and then India. Especially Indonesia and India, when their turn comes, I think G20 is a forum which can tackle public health. It's ideally well placed because 80% of the population is covered, 80% of GDP is covered. G20 covers almost the entire world. You've got African representation, etc. UN Security Council, less, because of the deep divisions in the Security Council between United States on the one hand and Russia, China on the other. I do not see the Security Council working very smoothly. The other forum which can help and feed into the G20 is the G7. And you know that
That's right.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called for a meeting with G7, and he has included India, South Korea, Australia as invitees to the G7. They are now calling it a D10, the Democracy 10,
Right.
if you like. That grouping can help.
In fact, the Sherpas also met as of today, I think, and so they may have, one has to see whether that was on the agenda, COVID, but it is likely to be one of the key topics of discussion when the G7 meet later this year. What would you say?
Yes, absolutely. I cannot imagine a forum meeting this year and not discussing COVID, frankly. Whichever forum you take, COVID is going to figure on the agenda. But the question is whether these fora will rise to the occasion. It calls for political willingness at the end of the day. And I don't know if that political willingness exists, but you asked me a question. I would say the G20, G7 are probably the best forum or the fora to do this kind of thing. And then the United Nations can enter the picture later. After all, WHO is also a specialized agency of the UN system.
Yes.
So we make use of WHO later to implement these recommendations. But I see G20 playing an important role, frankly.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, for your enlightening thoughts. Moving on then to our next story, let's take a look at updates on COVID-19 from across the world. So over 12 crore 88 lakh people worldwide have contracted COVID-19, while more than 10 crore 40 lakh have recovered from it. So far the death toll from this virus stands at above 28 lakh 18,000 globally. The US is the worst hit country affected by COVID-19, and the number of cases have crossed 3 crore 10 lakh, and the country has seen over 5 lakh 64,000 fatalities from COVID-19, followed by Brazil. The US President Joe Biden on Tuesday signed an extension to a federal government program that provides forgivable loans to small businesses to enable them to maintain their workers' payrolls. This is while navigation of the economic uncertainties of COVID-19 continue. So after signing this extension of the deal, Biden said that if he hadn't signed the deal, well, hundreds of thousands of people could have lost their jobs.
We're pushing lenders to raise their game and provide more help to the many small businesses, particularly Hispanic as well as African American small businesses are just out of business because they got bypassed the first time around. Today I'm proud to sign the extension, which I'm going to do in a second, of the Paycheck Protection Program. It is a bipartisan accomplishment. Nearly 90,000 businesses are still in line, and there's money left. Without me signing this bill today, there are hundreds of thousands of people who could lose their jobs and small and family businesses that might close forever. And as you know, small business is the backbone of our economy, representing almost 50% of all the employees in America.
Well, a German company that supplies materials that go into making Myanmar's banknotes has suspended deliveries. Giseke and Devriant, that's the name of the company. It said in a statement that it was halting all deliveries to Myanmar state-owned security print works with immediate effect. So supply chains are taking action, but the situation in the country remains grim, to say the least.
No end to political crisis in Myanmar. Clashes between military and protesters continue unabated. At least 521 civilians have been killed in 2 months of protest against the February 1st coup. 141 of them on Saturday, the bloodiest day of the unrest, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. Activists held candlelit vigils overnight after scores of deaths in recent days from a military crackdown on anti-coup. Activists held candlelit vigils overnight after scores of deaths in recent days from a military crackdown on anti-coup protesters and clashes in ethnic border areas. The United States has ordered non-essential embassy staff to leave. These are the visuals by Thailand's Defense Ministry. The border soldiers are carrying ethnic Karen refugees on stretchers after receiving them at a border river, then transporting them to a nearby hospital for treatment. About a dozen people fleeing military airstrikes in Myanmar were allowed to cross into a Thai border village on Tuesday to receive medical treatment. Heavy clashes erupted on the weekend near the Thai border between the army and fighters from Myanmar's oldest ethnic minority force, the Karen National Union, which has denounced the coup. Villagers living along the Thai side of a mountainous border region between Myanmar and Thailand have been on a heightened state of alert, preparing for the spillover from possible armed clashes from across the border between the Myanmar military and ethnic rebel fractions.
Some protests are also hoping for the ethnic armed group to provide protection. Even in some area, they are calling to intervene, joining hands with the protesters to jump in. But we are still reluctant to do that because we understand where the situation. The people themselves calling for a peaceful demonstration, protest against the military coup on their own.
The governor of Thailand's border province said on Tuesday that they returned to their home country voluntarily, and if tensions rose, a center would be set up to provide necessary assistance.
Currently, they fully understand the situations and have had a sense of relief. Voluntarily decided to return to their homes. Only some of them are left, which we expect that they would return in next 1 or 2 days. If the tension rises, the province will set up an ad hoc center to assist those seeking refuge from the unrest in Myanmar.
Myanmar has been in turmoil since the army ousted an elected government led by Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, detaining her and reimposing military rule after a decade of tentative steps towards democracy. Violence has also been flared between the army and insurgents in frontier regions, and refugees are spilling over borders. World Today Desk, DD India.
And Hindustan Aeronautics Limited has categorically denied that HAL has supplied arms to the Myanmar Defence Forces in commercial deals, contrary to reports published from Yangon and sourced to AFP. HAL has clarified that it has had no dealings with the Myanmar military. AFP news agency had cited a UNHRC report which wrongly names HAL as one of the suppliers of arms to the military junta of Myanmar. Clearing the ships that built up on the Suez Canal while the waterway was blocked by a giant container ship could take 4 days, although catching up at ports will take longer. This is what the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, has said. They said so yesterday. The backlog of ships will likely take 4 to 5 days to be back to normal, according to Jan Hoffman, an UNCTAD expert on logistics. Shipping experts in Asia say that the Suez Canal blockage may push costs of cargo ship imports up by as much as 20% Industry groups say that delay in deliveries will add further strain to the region's shippers, adding to costs already incurred as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent Richard Kimber gets us this report from Hong Kong's main cargo terminal.
I'm standing more than 8,000 kilometres away from the Suez Canal here in Hong Kong, but the impact of the blockage there is already having significant problems emerging here in the shipping industry. Hong Kong's Shipping Council says there will be at least a 3-week delay for any goods coming through the canal from Europe to Asia, and a 3-week delay for any goods passing in the opposite direction. And it's important to understand how vital that canal is to Asia. It serves as the shortest and quickest trade route between the two continents and accounts for some 7% of the total volume of trade that passes through Hong Kong to reach Europe. The Chartered Institute of Logistics says that there will be a cost increase of up to 20% for imported goods coming into Hong Kong and throughout Asia, and that's on top of an already 4- to 5-fold increase that the shipping industry has experienced over the past 12 months because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's being felt not only by the shipping companies but also by the port behind me and of course all of the importers and distributors. There is some level of optimism from some of the main operators at the port here who say that because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, they're actually operating in a more streamlined capacity than ever and are therefore better able to cope with the challenges of a blockage in the Suez Canal than they might have been had it happened before the COVID-19 pandemic. But nevertheless, many of the big shipping companies here say that even though it's costing them some $8,000 per day to have their cargo ships sat idle on the other side of the Suez Canal, they're preferring to do that rather than send those ships on the longer and more costly journey and potentially more dangerous journey around the southern tip of Africa, which has the risk not only of potential piracy but also of the difficult sailing conditions there. And so despite the added cost of having those ships simply sat idle, they're placing all of their hopes on trying to get this blockage resolved as quickly as possible. Richard Kimber in Hong Kong.
Well, India today had attended a key meeting of the regional grouping BIMSTEC, which discussed ways to further expand cooperation among its member nations to effectively deal with key challenges. The senior officials meeting of the BIMSTEC countries, it was held under the chairmanship of Sri Lanka, and the Indian delegation at this virtual meeting of the grouping was headed by the Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs, Riva Ganguly Das. Senior officials from foreign ministries of all 7 BIMSTEC member states attended this meeting. The External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met the Speaker of Tajikistan, Zokirzoda Mohammodathir Zoir, during his visit to Tajikistan. During this meeting, the minister appreciated the strong parliamentary support for Indo-Tajik cooperation. The Foreign Minister, the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, also paid homage at the memorial of Ismaili Somoni, the founder of the first Tajik state, during his visit. The National Aerospace Laboratories, CSIR-NAL, pioneers in India's civil aircraft design and development, rolled out the Hansa NG today at Bengaluru. Hansa NG, it's a 2-seater trainer aircraft made in India with advanced technology on the basis of test pilots' feedback, and it aims to be a game changer in the training of commercial pilots in our country. The rollout of this aircraft has now cleared the runway, in a sense, to start its test flights by the end of the year. A big leap by NAL towards Atmanirbhar Bharat in making indigenous advanced commercial aircraft at low cost, and that can fly for 6 hours non-stop.
The rollout of the Hansa NG in the dazzling spotlights signalled India's arrival on the runway to self-reliance in the aerospace technology for the civil aviation sector. Hansa NG is an upgraded version of Hansa launched in 1993, and 11 flying clubs already in possession of the aircraft. The new generation version is equipped with smart avionics and the advanced features in its cockpit. This will cater to the demand for a trainer aircraft in India, which is still dependent on exporting such aircrafts. This Swadeshi trainer has already received 30 letters of intent from various flying clubs in the country, and HAL is all set to manufacture the aircrafts soon.
Once we had done a market survey, nobody was believed us that there is a real market. So we have a short film, but before that I will open up few things. So we did after market survey, we called people and then started making an aircraft and all, started working out the specification of aircraft. And then today you are surprised, I have 30 LOIs in hand.
The demand for training aircraft in the civil sector gained momentum since 2016, and India became the largest civil aviation market as the government opened up avenues such as the Udan scheme, connecting smaller towns and improving air connectivity. The DGCA has assured full support to the NAL and the HAL in their efforts to boost India's domestic flying sector.
The program has been going on extremely well. I agree with CMD HAL that we need to do much more. The SARAS program also is doing pretty well, and we do hope that we will be able to have SARAS commissioned in the field in about 2 years from now. We do hope that we receive support from the government for the RTA in the coming time.
Look forward to the new projects that we are coming up with in NAL along with HAL. One of them is, of course, the SARAS Mark II. So there are a lot of changes between SARAS Mark I and Mark II, and we hope that comes in fast and becomes a part of the Udan scheme. So we hope that the activities with NL being centric to it will become more faster and more number of activities as far as the civil aviation sector is concerned. And HAL definitely is behind them for supporting in the manufacturing sector.
The aircraft underwent several changes, and fabrication of the wings and other parts were done at the NAL in Bengaluru amidst the pandemic. Incidentally, the Centre for Civil Aircraft Design and Development at NAL was also renamed after Professor Rodham Narasimha, renowned Indian aerospace scientist who championed India's efforts to be a leading player in the civil aircraft design and development. Aisha Khanan's report from Bengaluru, DD India.
Moving on, then, Pakistan has lifted a nearly 2-year-old ban on Indian sugar and cotton imports, reportedly, a step towards reviving suspended trade between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. Pakistan's Economic Coordination Council, the top decision-making body for these matters, on Wednesday allowed the private sector in Pakistan to import 0.5 million tons of white sugar. Now let's take you through some news, the latest occurrings around the world in a world at a glance.
Starting with the United States, the country will soon speak out about human rights everywhere, including in allies countries and at home. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the trend lines on human rights continue to move in the wrong direction. Blinken's comments came as the Human Rights Report outlining the situation last year in nearly 200 countries worldwide was released. Meanwhile, a top US border official on Tuesday said that he expects more than 1 million migrants to arrive at the US-Mexico border this year as sign of a growing humanitarian challenge for President Joe Biden on the southwest border. Tens of thousands of Central American migrants have trekked to the US-Mexico border in recent months. The increase is driven by poor economic conditions in the region. On the other hand, in Honduras, several hundred Honduran migrants set out for the Guatemalan border before dawn yesterday in hopes of eventually reaching the United States were largely dispersed. Other recent caravans have been broken up by Guatemalan authorities. This relatively small one appeared to dissolve before reaching the Guatemala border on a day US Vice President Kamala Harris spoke with Guatemala President about migration. In Colombia, several rescue workers and volunteers were scrambling to rescue 11 trapped miners in rural Nira, with hope of finding survivors diminishing by the minute. According to reports, this illegal mine flooded last week on March 26th, with the trapped miners now having spent nearly 4 days underground. Family members of the miners as well as volunteer rescue workers gathered for a mass near the site of the mine, hopeful that a water pump used to extract water from the shaft will prove successful. Mexico's sleepy resort town of Tulum is under the international spotlight for all the wrong reasons after the weekend killing of a Salvadoran woman in Mexican police custody who died after a female officer was seen in a video kneeling on her back. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said 36-year-old Victoria Salazar Arrizia has been subject to brutal treatment and murdered after her detention on Saturday by 4 police officers. Leng Chung-ying, former chief executive of Hong Kong, has said that the latest changes made to the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region will improve representation on the electoral board. The Standing Committee of the National People's Congress earlier Tuesday voted unanimously to adopt the amended Annex 1st and Annex 2nd to the Basic Law of the HKSAR to improve the electoral system of the Special Administrative Region. The 2 annexes concern the method for the selection of the HKSAR Chief Executive and the method for the formation of the HKSAR Legislative Council and its voting procedures respectively. Indonesia's Transport Ministry on Wednesday said that it had recovered the cockpit voice recorder of Sriwijaya Air jet that had crashed into the Java Sea shortly after takeoff on January 9th, killing all 62 people on board. Authorities unveiled the CVR to the media at a news conference in Jakarta on Wednesday. A preliminary report by investigators into the Sriwijaya crash said that the plane had an imbalance in engine thrust that eventually led the plane into a sharp roll and then a final dive into the sea. Tens of thousands of people are feared to have been displaced following a deadly attack by Islamic State-linked insurgents on a gas hub town in northern Mozambique, aid agencies announced as rescuers searched for survivors on Tuesday. Many of those fleeing were believed to have scattered into dense forest or to have attempted to escape by boat when Palma came under attack. Mozambique's government has confirmed dozens of deaths, including at least 7 killed when militants ambushed a convoy of vehicles trying to escape a besieged hotel on March 26th. Oyster farmer Brett Harper glides over the water to his oyster lease, checking on what little crop has been left after devastating floods left his business on Australia's mid-north coast in tatters. Having farmed the Sydney rock oyster for 27 years in Dunbogan, Harper's Oysters produces approximately 540,000 oysters a year. The repair bill will now be in hundreds of thousands as floodwaters wash away his crop. With this year's income lost, Harper says it's now a waiting game for the 1-year-old crop to be saleable. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, it was only in 2017 that Manu Bhakars first tasted success at the international level by winning the Asian Junior Championships that year, and she hasn't looked back since. Bhakars announced her arrival with a title-winning performance at the 2018 Commonwealth Games and had established herself as one of the best pistol shooters in the world after she won medals at the ISSF World Cup in Guadalajara in Mexico, and also in the 2018 Youth Olympics. Now, Manu Bhakars extended her sharpshooting in 2019 as well in the recently concluded Shooting World Cup too. She was a prominent performer. Let's look at this report.
At 14, she picked up a gun for the first time. At 16, she had become the undisputed Indian #1 in the 10-meter air pistol event, broken multiple national records, beaten multiple Olympic medalists, won a Commonwealth Games gold, and also became the youngest Indian to win gold at the Shooting World Cup. 2017, Manu Bhakars' meteoric rise. Manu Bhakars' very first whiff of international success came at the 2017 Asian Junior Championships, where she had won a silver medal. And that was just the beginning. The same year saw Manu Bhakar bagging a phenomenal 9 medals at the National Games in Kerala, highlighted by breaking a record set by veteran World Cup medalist Hina Sidhu with a 242.3-point haul. 2018, success in the World Cup. The 2018 Shooting World Cup in Mexico announced Manu on the global stage. There was no stopping the Haryana youngster. She kept breaking the big guns in 2018. Her competition in ISSF Mexico World Cup was against local favourite Alejandra Zavala in the women's 10-meter air pistol category after Manu Bhakar had qualified for the finals quite comprehensively. The tournament saw the Indian shooting sensation narrowly edging out the two-time champion by an incredibly close margin of 0.4, thus becoming the youngest Indian to win a gold medal at the ISSF World Cup. 2018, a first at the Youth Olympics. At the 2018 Youth Olympics in Buenos Aires, Manu Bhakar was not only the first shooter but the first female athlete from India ever to win a gold medal at the event. Manu was getting sharper as the years progressed, thereby proving again that age was just a number for the teenage sensation. 2019, gold at the Asian Championships. The proof of Manu Bhakar's phenomenal talent was on display in 2019 when, despite not being in top form, she managed to win a gold at the 14th Asian Championship as well as in the Air Pistol ISSF World Cup final in Putian in China. 2019 Tokyo Olympic quota. The icing on the cake was, however, qualifying for the Tokyo Olympics in the 10-meter pistol event after finishing 4th at the ISSF Munich World Cup in May 2019. India's medal hopeful? So far in her career, Manu has won 4 individual gold medals in her pet 10-meter air pistol event and 6 gold medals in the 10-meter air pistol mixed team event. However, the ongoing self-isolation could make things difficult for the Indian shooter. Still only a teenager, Manu Bhakar can aim high as she polishes her skills going forward. And if the cluster of medals she has earned so early in her career is anything to go by, she could be on course to make her country proud. Once again, this time on the biggest stage of all, the Olympic Games. Sports Desk, DD India.
And now news not from the mainstream, but neither from the sidelines, just news beyond the headlines.
Ali Chernik is a 27-year-old photo editor turned baker behind Ali's Banana Bread. This company makes 500 banana bread loaves per week and sells out within minutes. Chernik had been making banana bread for years using her grandmother's recipe and would make it for friends in college. The COVID pandemic hit a little more than a year ago, forcing her kitchen to close temporarily. Chernik left her job as a photo editor for clothing maker Ralph Lauren. Of her 500 weekly loaves, 300 currently go to a market on Manhattan's Stony Upper East Side and 200 for delivery nationwide. With foreign tourists kept away from the historic city of Bruges, chocolate maker Dominique Persson is counting on his fellow Belgians' taste for the unusual to boost business in the run-up to Easter. Among the spring specials he concocted ahead of the festival, the former chef is particularly proud of a praline made of grass juice, Granny Smith, apple and yuzu, an East Asian type of lemon. On a spring day, the picturesque city of Bruges, crisscrossed with canals, is normally humming with foreign tourists, but plummeting visitor number have taken their toll on many of the shops in the town. However, Persson is hopeful and says that his chocolate contains a secret ingredient that has the power to counter the lockdown blues, a sentiment echoed by the customers. People across Britain enjoyed warmer temperatures following a long winter where people were kept largely at home by the nationwide COVID lockdown. In Brighton, on England's south coast, people congregated on the city's beach to take advantage of the sunshine and blue skies. While temperatures there reached around 18 degrees Celsius, thermometers topped to 22 to 23 degrees in London. The warmer temperatures arrived a day after England's stay-at-home lockdown order ended. The lockdown had been in place since January 4th as a result of rising COVID cases. People are now permitted to congregate outdoors in groups of 6 from 2 different households. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson urged caution as the lockdown measures were eased on Monday, asking people to stick to social distancing rules and other restrictions that are hoped will help avoid another COVID lockdown. In Germany's Cologne, many people are going outside to enjoy the sunny weather. Many who let the sun shine on themselves on the banks of the Rhine are finding a welcome change in the monotonous Corona grey. People say guidelines related to COVID and social distancing rules are much easier to bear in spring. Some said, wear a mask, enjoy the weather, enjoy the sky, enjoy the panorama of the Rhine and believe in health. A stray cat took her sick kittens to a local veterinary clinic run by Karabaglar municipality in Turkey's western province of Izmir. When the cat first walked into the clinic with one of her kittens, veterinarians didn't understand her motive. The cat meowed for a long time after bringing in a second kitten. The stray feline and her kittens were placed in adoption after the completion of the treatment. Comcast Corporation's Universal Studios Hollywood theme park in California is all set to delight a number of visitors on April 16th, the company has said in a statement. The company also said that by the time the theme park opens, almost all the rides will be operational. Tickets will go on sale from April 8th, and under guidelines related to COVID will only be available to California residents. Also, Disneyland is scheduled to open its gates on April 30th. Guests at both the parks will be required to wear masks, undergo temperature checks at entrances, and follow other safety measures. In Nigeria, a 50-year-old businesswoman has gone back to school wearing pink dress and bonnet, which is her school uniform. Shade Ajoyi sits in class alongside kids nearly 4 decades younger than her. This is the first time in her life that she has stepped inside a classroom. A businesswoman by profession, making and selling purses and bags, Ajoyi says she's not ashamed of starting school at the age of 50 and wants to be an example for people who have missed out on education. SpaceX has announced the final members of the crew it plans to send on what they call the world's first all-civilian mission to space. The mission, dubbed Inspiration 4, will be commanded by 38-year-old philanthropist Jared Isaacman. SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket will launch the crew aboard a Dragon spacecraft later this year and will be monitored by SpaceX Mission Control. The crew members will undergo commercial astronaut training by SpaceX on Falcon 9 launch vehicle and Dragon spacecraft, which is currently attached to International Space Station. Once Dragon returns to Earth, SpaceX team will inspect and refurbish the spacecraft ahead of the Inspiration 4 mission. It's that time again. The slender stalks in white or green are being pulled out of the ground in Bavaria. This is done traditionally and by hand to this day. That requires plenty of harvest support, and that in times of pandemic. The provisions against the spread of the virus are expressed in strict hygiene regulations on site, which have a strong impact on this year's sting, reports Peter Strobel from the Asparagus Producers Association in southern Bavaria. In the latest eruption, a river of orange lava flowed from the Icelandic volcano, drawing crowds to admire the spectacle. Short videos on social media. Thousands of Icelanders have flocked to the site of the eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula, some 30 kilometers southwest of the capital, hoping to be awed by rare lava fountains and even to cook a meal on the scorching crust of the magma. To cope with the horde of visitors, authorities in Iceland have set up a 3.5-kilometer hiking trail to the eruption site and are patrolling the area to prevent onlookers from venturing into hazardous areas polluted by volcanic gases. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, let's now turn the pages of history and see what major events took place on this day in history.
On this day in 1889, the Eiffel Tower in Paris officially opened. After climbing the 1,710 steps that led to the top of the tower, people unfurled the French flag to the sound of a 21-gun salute. The Eiffel Tower remained the world's highest construction until the Chrysler Building was erected in New York in 1930. People from all over the world gathered in the city of Paris to have a look at this masterpiece. In 1921, the Royal Australian Air Force was formed. Each squadron consisted of 18 machines, giving a war formation of 3 flights of 6 machines each. 3 of the squadrons were stationed in New South Wales and 4 in Victoria. Australian Flying Corps remained part of the Australian Army until 1919, when it was disbanded along with the AIF. King George V approved the prefix Royal in June 1921. The RAAF then became the second Royal Air Arm to be formed in the British Commonwealth following the British Royal Air Force. The United States Census Bureau signed a contract for the first commercial computer in the United States and thus entered a new era. UNIVAC, the Universal Automatic Computer, was the first commercial computer produced in the United States. UNIVAC was designed by J. Presper Eckert and John W. Mauchly. During the war, they had designed ENIAC, a large-scale general-purpose computer at the University of Pennsylvania. UNIVAC was the stored program computer that had 5,400 vacuum tubes, could tabulate 4,000 items a minute.
And that's the world today. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.